Hi everyone, welcome to Between Two Mammoths. I'm here today with Carrie Palmquist, Associate Professor of Psychology and also Chair of the Psychology Department. Carrie, thank you so much for being on Between Two Mammoths.
Happy to be here.
Carrie, you are a specialist in child development, and I want to talk to you a little bit about having difficult conversations, a topic that's very much on the mind of everybody these days. Tell me a little bit from a developmental perspective about what are the skills that children learn as they're learning to communicate that help them to have difficult conversations?
My research actually focuses a lot on how children think about other people. So in a way, it's sort of, if I can flip the question around a little bit, how kids decide who might be a good person to communicate with. We know they're sensitive to people who have been accurate in the past, people who have good intentions, so they're good faith communicators. And I think a lot of times when we think about difficult conversations, even as adults, we rely on people expressing those same types of qualities in their communication, right? We like to communicate with, and we feel safer and more welcome communicating with people who are honest and who seem to have those good intentions. And there's this developmental trajectory there.
Does your research suggest what we can be doing as adults to try to help people have difficult conversations with us?
If we want to think about the developmental origins, then we could say that, yeah, like maybe there are ideas that become ingrained even when we're very young, some of these things about preferring trustworthy people. But I also think that we know that we change as we get older too. We become more skeptical, we sometimes shut down a little bit in terms of the folks that we are willing to interact with. Moving beyond children, thinking about how to remain open-minded, because that is something that children have that we sometimes lack.
Tell me about your experience teaching our students.
Yeah.
How do you help them to stay open-minded at this moment where they might be becoming more skeptical?
Yeah.
Have you experimented with trying to stage difficult conversations in your own classes?
Part of this, at least from my perspective, part of the important thing here is giving students tools for these tough conversations. And one way that we do this in psychology is by helping them to read empirical work to help support some difficult conversations. So in developmental psychology, for example, in our section on attachment, my students learn about research on child attachment, but then we also talk about parent-child separation at the border. And they listen to a podcast with some experts who apply those issues to attachment research. And then they come to class and work in small groups, having difficult conversations, but then they have the tools to kind of support them in that. And I found that that does give them something to base the conversation on at the beginning, and then gives them a little bit more comfort in having those difficult conversations.
You also take your classes to go out and work in the community, in museums. I think you're working at the Springfield Museum this semester,
Yes,
is that right?
we are, yeah.
Tell me more about that and what that experience is and what you think students take away from it.
It's the psychology of play. So students begin the semester by learning about the research on play. It turns out it's really messy, and there's lots of great debates about what do children learn from play and how can we implement play in meaningful ways. And then we partner with a community member to think about promoting playful learning. And this semester we're at the Springfield Museum, so we're going to their science museum and also the Dr. Seuss Museum there. I think it's great because it helps students think about play, but in addition to that, they get to work with community partners and see how empirical work kind of pairs up with real-world challenges. And so I've definitely seen their eyes open in terms of opportunities.
Yeah. I also know you're the parent of a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
Now, as an expert in child development, someone who teaches things like the psychology of play,
Yeah.
does all of that academic knowledge make parenting any easier for you?
I wish I'd say yes. I think sometimes the one way it does help is it helps to reduce some anxiety sometimes, because you see that there's lots of different types of kids out there and they develop in lots of different ways, and that for the most part they do just fine. But I would say that I think there is sort of a hat that you put on when it's your own kid who's struggling or is having a tough day versus the hat that you put on when you're reading it on a piece of paper. It's much quieter, much less stressful. And so I do think it's sort of two different worlds, but I try my best to take what I can from my work into life. Yeah.
Well, Carrie, thanks so much for being on this and for giving us so much great advice about having difficult conversations, about taking play seriously, and for those parents who are out there not being quite so anxious.
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me.